Well, yes, that's what we're still talking about this morning. We're hoping to be joined shortly by the Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, who will be joining us via Zoom. But right now we have with us Mr. Bode Longe, who is a strategy consultant and power expert. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much, Malkwe.
Well, so this, I don't know what it's been like at your end in terms of electricity supply, but we do know in the last couple of days that our grid, our national grid, has collapsed twice within a space of less than 48 hours. And it's something that has caused the nation great trouble, and it's beginning to impact businesses, especially when you also think of the fact that there is a general energy crisis. Or the alternatives, the major alternatives which people use to power their small and big businesses, diesel and petrol, is also being... Diesel, which has been deregulated, is available, but the prices are, getting out of reach. Petrol, on the other hand, is very scarce to come by, and you spend hours and hours getting to it. So, from your perspective, as somebody who is a strategy... yes, a strategy consultant. What strategy have we missed first? And perhaps what strategy should we be adopting right now to try and get back on track?
All right. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I think you're indeed very correct. The last few days has been quite challenging in terms of power or energy. I mean, it's really what you can call rightly so, an energy crisis, right? The electricity supply situation has been quite epileptic, and also we also have a crisis with the fossil fuel, all hitting us at the same time. So the question is, what have we got wrong, in terms of strategy? I'll speak to the power situation. If we look at it, this particular time of the year is also coincides with when we have the most load demanded, right? So if you like, at the peak of the dry season, right, when it gets really hot, historically you find out that that's when majority of energy is consumed. We have a lot of power that is requested for cooling, so you find out that at this particular time, unbeknownst to many of us, your fridges are working harder, right? Because you set them at a temperature, and what they try to do is, whatever the ambient temperature is, they try to ensure they achieve the 15 degrees or 12 degrees or whatever, even your air conditioning system as well. So all of this, without any change in your behavior, right, just because of the weather situation, there's a bigger, demand from the grid. And unfortunately, this...
From even the regular appliances which you have in your home.
Which you have in your home, correct, yes. So now, this now coincides with the time where, you now have the power situation. So there's also, there's been some challenges with the generation as well. So you find out that this is actually, a number of headwinds hitting us at the same time. So that explains why, there's a bit of maybe a strain on the network as we currently have it. But in terms of strategy, where do we miss it? Reality is these issues are known. So it all goes back to, what do you do in your times of plenty? So you provide for your times, for times when you're lean. So I think more integrated planning, right, could have helped this. We know this is almost a regular cycle, right? So the equipment, the infrastructure should actually have, we need to pay more attention to those, especially at this time. Now, it's not as though
Just before you go on, and I'm going to be bringing in, I just saw now that we have the Director General of MAN waiting for us on Zoom. We'll be bringing him into the conversation shortly. But you said something about what you do in your time of plenty. We know that electricity is a commodity that goes to waste more or less if you don't use it. If generation has been done, if you don't find a way to pass that power on to homes, whatever has been generated is wasted already. What are you supposed to do in the time of plenty, so to speak? Are we supposed to store the power?
Right. Okay. So plenty in this reference is, what do you do to plan, for the time when situations will be quite different? So, for example, you already know this will be a reality, so you ought to have planned your maintenance properly. So, in terms of resource allocation, essentially, of course, and electricity is consumed instantaneously, right? But of course, as well, you also know that you don't need to wait until the entire system is really under this much stress, if you know this actually was going to be. So the reference is to, what do you do when, in a sense, you have your slack period to prepare for, when all the hit will really come down on you, so to speak.
Okay, so big questions there. But let me quickly bring in our Director General, Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadir, is the Director General Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Good morning to you, and welcome to the program. I do not know how this scarcity, would I say this upsurge in the price of diesel and this scarcity of electricity on the power grid has hit manufacturers. How are you taking this? How are people in your industry taking this on?
Thank you very much for having me. We are taking it very badly. I mean, to just put it quite frankly, because we started the year with a lot of optimism. I mean, very early in the year, the Minister for Industry, Trade and Investment assured that government was focusing on power and infrastructure. And this bear about 60% of our cost structure. So we were naturally expectant. We also knew that we had overcome the impact of COVID-19 in 2020. We stabilized in 2021. We were looking to take off in 2022. But very early in the year, we were hit by this thunderbolt, if I may put it. The price of diesel moving from less than 300 naira per barrel in January to 750 naira 2 months later. Then electricity becomes more epileptic. Now, these two put together has put so much strain and anxiety on the manufacturing sector. And just when your colleagues were reviewing the newspaper today, I heard that NEC is saying that the electricity tariff will be reviewed every 6 months in tandem with Forex. That is disaster waiting to happen, because we all know that the Naira is performing very badly against the dollar. And you see, for us in the manufacturing sector, this is critically important because we have the highest multiplier effect on the rest of the economy. So when we are subjected to this kind of uncertainty and abrupt shocks, it is difficult to see how we are going to cope. Already, especially the small-scale industries, are closing shop as we speak because their working capital cannot just sustain their production. So to tell you, we are taking it very badly. Let me stick to your question. We are taking it very badly, and we are actually consulting widely to see how we'll get out of this bedlam, because it threatens our competitiveness, it threatens our capacity utilization, our cost structures, it threatens our employment profile, and it just throws all the planning that we have done for year 2022 out of joint.
Well, certainly that is that is a very steep increase, over 100%, it would seem. I mean, from 300 to about 750 naira per liter of diesel. What other alternatives are there? People have spoken that, talked about how some companies are using gas. Are those companies using gas, are they faring any better?
Okay, so if we talk about gas, we have historic challenges. To start with, the gas that we are buying is dollarized, so to say. So it's still subject to the vagaries of the same almighty Forex that we are talking about. And there's the infrastructure for gas to be used across the country is simply not there. we have been clamoring for manufacturers to be treated as industrial users, just like the Gencos, because we are using this thing in the normal course of doing business. We are not selling it. So the price at which we are buying gas is high. So now we are being buffeted from many angles. Electricity is not there. Diesel as the alternative is too expensive. Even the small-scale industries that manage to use petrol, that one too is not available. Then gas is expensive for us and does not reach every part of the country as at yet. So the gas as an alternative, yes, it would have been okay if we had it going well. And don't also forget that industries that were not using gas before will have to expend money to convert their processes to receive gas. And I don't need to tell you how much we are borrowing money from the banks. So I think something urgent and effective has to be done.
You say that you're consulting widely. Who are you consulting and what has the response been?
Well, okay, it's still, first we have consulted amongst our members, and we have seen that the major challenge that we have, especially among the big ones, and which we have tried to solve before, is that there is no way we can get power at reasonable price. If the eligible customer scheme was allowed to work, then we'll have been able to have our clusters, at least in areas where we have clusters, and there are many, to subscribe to the eligible customer scheme. I mean, that can be immediately achieved. But what we are thinking, generally, those we are consulting with government, we are reaching out to the marketers so that we can reenact what we did around the year 2020, where we can get prime supply at prices that will be affordable. We are also suggesting that maybe we should remove VAT, at least to reduce the price. We should also look at areas where we can get, probably from neighboring countries, as I understand that our borders, some of them are still effectively shut. So we can open up to receive diesel from those places. And then for government to really intervene by quenching the other pain points that we have, because it's not only diesel that we are dealing with. So if we have a lowering of the pressure on imposition of tax, regulatory compliance costs, and logistics and so on, we would be able to reduce the pressure on the sector that is threatening to make the first quarter of this year far worse than what we experienced same period in 2020 when we had COVID-19.
It's a lot to take in. I'm just looking at the spiral effect of this, because if inflation should spiral, you know, the CBN might be forced to raise monetary, might be forced to, you know, rein in inflation, and, you know, that is going to have an effect on borrowing rates, etc. And then the circle just comes around. It's, you know, it's a lot to wrap our heads around. But I think that what the consumer is worried about now is whether or not they will be able to afford the produce or the products that will certainly come out from your members, from the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Has this had any effect on the prices of products which your members have come up with, or would you say that there is still sufficient buffer within production costs to be able to absorb this?
There is none, actually. And even before now, the price of diesel before the war, that is the general blame taker for all of this, the price of diesel had moved from less than 300 to 350. And then it has also led to a slight increase in our prices. But now that it has doubled, and more than doubled, the first fall will be taken by the price of the goods that we sell. And you see, this also will affect even the logistics of distributing those goods when they have left our factory floors. Because most of the haulage vehicles use diesel. Now, when you juxtapose this with the depletion of the disposable income of the average Nigerian, you can imagine that, one, they may not be able to buy because it will certainly be more expensive. And this is not only the area where our cost of production is rising. So it will certainly lead to increase in price of the products, and it will mean that they will buy less. So even the ones that we manage to produce with our depleting working capital, we will not be able to sell. We'll have to invest in warehouses to store them because they are unplanned inventory that we are generating. So it's a lose-lose for everybody. That's why there has to be a national conversation on this emergency. We have to talk. We have to understand whether we want our industries to continue to function or not. Just recently, we are having an increase in excise duty, even goods that are not excisable. The food and beverage and tobacco sector that is contributing 4.5% to the real GDP and 49% to manufacturing GDP. You are increasing and you are introducing excise. This is not the time to do all of this. So the conversation has to be holistic. I mean, let's not get it twisted that it's only diesel and so on that is the problem. There are a whole lot of other problems. We are engaging the government. But what we are saying is that this engagement should yield food quickly. And we have to do this before the politicians get busy. I think by June, July or so, very few people will be listening to you if you talk about the economy. So the time to do it is now.
Well, let me ask Mr. Lunge, something that he raised earlier when he said we know what the problems are, and it would then seem that, okay, so if we know what the problems are, we're either playing the ostrich or we don't just want to do what we know is necessary for us to do. And the issues that Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadri has raised will only get worse. So what are the things that you think we need to do immediately? I know that many times we just want to solve today's problems today. But then, if we solve today's problems today without having in mind the foresight of what the implications could be tomorrow, there could be another problem waiting for us tomorrow. So what are those things that we have not done? I'm trying to rephrase my question to you now.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think, first off, Mr. Segun's comment already, is quite loaded. I mean, he's spoken to a lot of this. What I think we can do as a country is what I call, there has to be connected thinking, all right? The economy is the sum total of all the parts, okay? So we really can't plan our strategies in silos. So we have the Manufacturers Association. They have their pain points, right? And this also has a snowball effect on every other sector within the economy. So what I have always advocated is and I think, can't remember who used the word, I heard win-win just now, but we need to plan a win-win for everyone. What do I mean? Okay, so at a time when we did some work for for a distribution company, we actually introduced a concessionary tariff for the heavy industrials and commercial customers. This tariff was such that if your capacity was of a certain size, you were to pay a discount on electricity tariffs. Now that was a good idea to encourage industrialization because there is a knock-on effect, on businesses. We've also advocated conversation around identification of, commercial clusters, right? So you have a market, it really pains me. I go to a market and I hear, for example, generators blaring and, the little man who's trying to eke a living is spending so much, on power. So I've always said, why can't, electricity, be reliable to this market cluster? So two things will happen. The man will spend less on his, running his business. He will make more money. And remember, he has a home, which is different from where he's running his business. So he would also be able to meet up with, other bills and everything at those other locations. So the planning has to be integrated, and this really would involve participants beyond the power sector. Okay, you've mentioned issues around excise duties going up on critical segments within the manufacturing space that will impact GDP, and also, as Mark rightly said, there are also inflationary concerns. So, you see, at this time, this is when all the players really, should get to the round table. So there should be a sort of deferred benefit. Maybe the government
Mr.
at this
Lunge,
time, right? It should be less...
well, perhaps you are saying that maybe the government should suspend, getting those taxes and excise duties now. I don't know how that will work. But concerning some of the suggestions that you have made, you mentioned it, I think, and Mr. Ajayi Kadri also referenced the dollarization of certain components of this power sector, which is, of course, a major driver of the economy. With the Naira-dollar rates the way they are now, is that factored into some of these concerns, this thinking that you talked about?
Yeah, by all means, so if I say a complete conversation, so you see all the key actors within the economy, you see there is a tariff framework which is not, which we did not design in Nigeria, but then there's a lot of wisdom to it. It's to allow issues around when we have the shocks to the economy, is to allow a bit of a moderation. So what you have is utilities at these times when there should be, that pressure to get tariffs beyond a particular range, we really could create some upset in the economy. Utilities are allowed to under-recover. So what it is there is that conversation that, okay, we understand, given your cost, the input costs, right, to your entire process, tariffs should be maybe this high, okay, but we can't really take it this high at the moment. So leave it at this level. When the macroeconomic indicators and things improve subsequently, right, then you can subtly, now review your tariffs to over-recover at those times. So this really is the work of government, right? World over, I think we really are starting to see that people are under pressure. We are seeing some demonstration because the cost of petrol, the pump price of petrol is going up, even in the advanced countries. So this is a reality, and Nigeria, we are no different. So what we could do at this time is to defer, right? Some of the key actors, we need to defer the benefits, ensure that this price increase effect is moderated, so we don't have a situation that snowballs on all of us.
I'm wondering how that will play out, given that, just yesterday we were talking about World Consumer Protection Day, and we know that every service provider is a consumer one way or another. I'll come to more of that, but let me quickly ask Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadri before we take a break. I know, Mr. Ajayi Kadri, that there are various sectors in the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Which of these sectors would you say is most hit by the challenge of the energy crisis?
Okay, yes, most hits will be those that demand electricity more. The steel industry, for instance. They are completely sold to using electricity supplied from the national grid because they can't even, most of their processes cannot be fired by diesel. So that would be the most hit sector. Then you can also look at other sectors that have high volume and who have to produce more to be able to sell because the profit margin is very slim. So you will need to factor in the fact that they will require to actively produce almost every time. They will have to run shifts for them to be able to have good bottom line to go with. So to answer your question, it is the steel industry, and it will have made a lot of sense if all of them were allowed to to get on the eligible customer scheme, which the other gentleman that is on this program spoke about.
Well, there's something you said earlier and referenced Manufacturers Association of Nigeria being placed side by side GENCOs. You give us a little more understanding of that when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Well, Mr. Ajayi Kadri, that issue you raised earlier when you referenced the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, side-by-side GENCOs, could you help us understand what you have in mind?
Okay. So I was talking in terms of the price at which we buy gas for those of our members that have been able to rejig their processes to receive gas. Currently, we are treated as commercial customers, which means that we buy at the normal general price. But the GENCOs have a concessionary rate that we want to be placed on because we use it in the course of doing business. We are not selling. That's what we are saying. Already, government has taken action on it because of our persistent dialogue with them, and we must give credit for the support of the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. But it is yet to be operationalized. So currently, the minister has said that he's consulting with his counterpart in the Ministry of Petroleum. But this has to be done and done now. We have been on this track for a very long time.
Speaking of things that need to be done now, because it will seem this power situation came to make a bad situation worse. Apparently, there have been various challenges in the manufacturing sector. So I came across this tweet yesterday, and I'd like to just read it out to you and find out how much this is a reality for players in that sector, saying that, how do you explain it that a manufacturer has an invoice of $425,000 to import materials, and all that is allocated to him from CBN is $210? How true is this for the sector? By the way, this is from a Twitter user, Bola Defila, who's said to be a manufacturer in Nigeria.
Well, I think it is true that that is our experience. I don't know of this particular case, but we have members that have applied for more than $1 million, and justifiably so, because we always state what we want and it can be verified both outside the country and here, and it's given $50,000. So it's just a joke, actually, to imagine that what you get is useful. It's not even enough to cover the cost of going to ensure that those raw materials are what you want and so on, for the person who is going to travel to ensure that. So we are getting far, far, far less than we need.
So how do you make up for that shortfall? Because I'm imagining myself, if you get just, let's say, 50,000 of, $1 million, how do you make up for that 950,000? Where do you get it from? Because the business has to go on.
Go to the black market at cutthroat price. And so when they were no longer giving, CBN was not allocating dollars to them, they get the dollars, we go to them to get it because business must go on. And that's why when other things are added to it, it's rubbing insult upon injury.
So for how long has this... Pardon me, for how long has this been going on? Because it's important to bring out these issues so at least the regulator and others involved can know, perhaps if they didn't before, so we can at least mitigate the impact of some of these, hits on our manufacturing sector, which is very important in terms of employment, in terms of, providing the basic things people need. So for how long have you had to endure this as manufacturers?
For a very long time. It is more than a decade it's been, but it's now been aggravated. And you see, the painful thing there is that sometimes you get very hopeful because the CBN will come up with fantastic ideas. I mean, we supported the CBN when they said they were going to give the dollar to the banks so that we'll be able to access it. But we go to the banks and it's not there. So, and then they said at the time, we were told that they were waiting for the procedures and so on. But the truth of it is that we are not getting. And one wonders what you must prioritize. If I have dollars, I will give it to people who will ensure that, who will make sure that they use it productively and even bring back forests to the country to increase our stock. But you are giving it to people who, if you give to a manufacturer, you are sure he's going to buy raw materials, he's going to buy machinery, he's going to buy spare parts. So, these are the three major components of what we use dollars for. And all of these will go to reflate the economy. Government will even take more taxes because our capacity utilization will increase. Our company income tax is going to increase.
I'll take this.
Guarantees this kind of thing.
I'll take this to Mr. Longe in a moment, but just to be clear, these raw materials that you have to import, are they things you can get here in Nigeria?
Most of them we cannot get. And even getting them from Nigeria, somebody has to make it available. Is it available? If it's available, is it available in the quantity you will need? When people say that oranges are everywhere and you are importing orange concentrates, if all the orange that we can take, not minding how insecurity and so on has affected your capacity to get them, if a company will use it up in 2 months, should he plan his production plan for 2 out of 12 months? These are realities that we need to face. And that's why we're having a conversation that will not just be for talk. Because we have been talking for a very long time. We are in constant touch with Raw Material Research and Development Council, and we can identify these ones. But to see if it's taking a very long time, industries don't have to close. So we have to import all of these. Even in some cases, when you try to import them, the tariff structure is, the duty you have to pay is skewed against the raw materials, vis-a-vis the finished goods that come in to unfairly compete with us in areas where we have comparative and competitive advantage.
Let me take this to Mr. Longe. It would seem that the manufacturers have been swimming against the tide. Mr. Jai Kadri says for 10 years now. And I imagine having to do this for 10 years. And you have a government, and essentially government is meant to make business easier. We talk about the ease of doing business index and how Nigeria has improved, but these are real stories. They have to get raw materials, they have to get power and all of that. And it looks like if power alone is 60%, I imagine, and it's double now, and then the raw materials, again, they can't get Forex. I just add all of that together. Is it that we're working in silos now? I'm talking government and the manufacturers, because it would seem as though the policies aren't coming together.
Right. Thank you very much. So I think I'll speak to the question in 2 parts. The first part is I think we are at a point now where the manufacturers really need to consider their energy mix. So many uncertainties, so it's going to be a bit challenging depending on just a single source. I know we've heard about the gas, for firing your generators. There's the grid when you have it, but I think also just in line with, with the global movement in terms of energy transition, I think the manufacturers also need to consider adding a bit of a renewable energy to their energy solutions to their energy mix. Now, what this could do in the immediate term, it may mean a little bump up in your overall unit cost of energy, but you will have that certainty you need to plan. And I think if I hear clearly, what the manufacturers essentially need is a stable environment to plan. So you don't have these shocks that comes to dislocate your business operations. Of course, renewable energy is kind of maybe challenging for very, very intensive production processes. But technologies are improving, and I think a proper sizing, of your power requirement, and also a bit of work around shifting or shuffling your production around, when you're able to get some reliability in terms of power could be helpful. So I think that conversation could happen in that regard, and I can say quite confidently that a few companies, in fact many, are actually looking in this direction. The other part of the conversation is, the cost of other material inputs into the production process. And you see, and it goes back to my earlier comment around connected thinking. There's really no way around this. Okay, if we cast our mind back, we would see that countries that have made the turn took deliberate efforts. When they started thinking about these things could have been 20 years back, and then they only just start to get the benefit. We do hear every time that the Malaysians came to Nigeria to get palm oil seeds, and now they are, the global exporter. So these are the conversations we need to have. And I think government's role should be more of an enabler, all right? I think government should do less of getting involved. Let the businesses have that enabling environment. So there are key inputs into the production processes. I think the conversation needs really to start now. And in fact, we did see a bit of this, I think, in the early days of the financial crisis, 2015, 2016. We have started to see some traction, right, in terms of how to ensure, we actually improved exports potential in the country.
Well,
but I'm
the
afraid
question
to
then
say,
is,
as soon as things ease up a bit,
yeah,
we get
the
to
question then is,
right.
how do we sustain that momentum? In fact, I mean, if you listen to Mr. Ajayi Kadri the other time, he says we've done enough talking. It's time to do something. So let me ask Mr. Ajayi Kadri, what would now there's a consequence, so to speak, by a fellow member of the organized private sector, NASIMA, who was quoted, the president of NASIMA was quoted as saying this. It says that all of the things that are going on now would the effect may not be immediate, but it will produce rising prices, rising inflation, erosion of the purchasing power of the population, and redistribution of wealth that plunges more of the population below the poverty line. In order to avoid this, if you agree, how much time do we have?
Well, honestly, he said it's going to be long term, but it is short term and it's happening right now. So we don't really have time. If you ask me, I would say that even before this week runs out, we need to have this conversation. The conversation around what government will do on specific challenges that we have. We can itemize them in terms of priority, that this is what we need to do. And you see, I think why we are not getting it right, why we appear to be, this problem appear to be lingering, is that we are paying lip service to some of these things we promise to do. If you give priority to, if you set your priorities right, you will know that you have to put your best foot forward. And you see, if every ministry, department, and agency of government that is concerned with dealing with this problem can agree that we need to prioritize manufacturing, for instance, it will mean that everything they have to do to make it happen, they will agree on it. And when they go back to work, they will ensure that it happens. If we do that, for instance, the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment will not have to take a very long time to convince the Ministry of Finance that it should drop the idea of increasing excise. The Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment will not have to spend a long time convincing his counterpart in the Minister of Petroleum that he should give gas to manufacturers at a premium price. I mean, we're all working for it's the same government in the federal government. So we should break down all these barriers and just get straight to solve the problem. The Minister of Industry doesn't have to spend a long time to convince the CBN governor that the unavailability of forex and buying forex at very high price is killing industries. We don't have to preach too much for you to see that the price of importing a 40-foot container from Singapore to Nigeria is the same thing as taking it from Apapa to Agbara, 27 kilometers away. It shouldn't be difficult. And all the facts are there. We have made all the representation. I think we just need to talk. We just need to talk, and we just need to act immediately.
So I know that manufacturers have made huge investments in certain areas. I mean, for instance, to buy a generator, I mean, that can power an industrial plant. I mean, that's a massive investment. You've talked about haulage, transport, and, you know, buying trucks that will also, you know, take goods from one part of the country to another, distribute these goods, you know, is also a big investment. I'm wondering whether manufacturers are, however, thinking of pooling resources to now begin to make use of investment of infrastructure that is now being developed. For instance, the rail lines. In a few places, we know that the rail lines are now functional between Lagos and Ibadan, for instance. And that could, you know, shorten the distance between Abuja and Kaduna, between Warri and Itakpe, for instance. But we're yet to really see freight cargo on these rail lines. Is it possible that manufacturers could start thinking along these lines? And then also in terms of raw materials, you've talked about how, you know, we do not seem to have a sustainable line. You gave the example of orange juice and concentrate. The CBN has been trying its best to see how we can encourage farmers to do this farming all year round. Is it also possible that manufacturers can begin to look into areas that perhaps with a little push, they will be able to source their raw materials locally?
Yes, honestly, if the CBN governor will meet with us, and we have asked severally for meeting, we will tell him what he needs to do, and we have always told him, then he should do it. We have met with the railway, the government agencies, and we are actually trying to take advantage of those rails that are now working. And on our own, MAN has a special window called the Manpower Development Company that we have established to provide, to work with investors and practitioners to provide power, embedded power in clusters. Of course, I need to also tell you that we have hiccups resulting from the activities of the DISCOs who think we are trying to take businesses away from them. So whichever way you look at it, a manufacturer actually needs time to concentrate on his job. We are going to do all of this because we have no choice. Otherwise, I have no business investing in power, whether it's renewable or it's from the national grid. I'm a manufacturer. I want to produce. The people I'm competing with, they don't produce power. That's the truth. And there's no way, you see, and these investments, where am I going to get the money? Is it from my capacity that is dwindling? Is it to collect from the banks? Am I not going to buy those equipment in dollars? Where am I going to get the dollars? So it's good to say, you know, explore other means and so on. How? I want to produce...
I think that, you know, you've raised a very valid point about how, you know, the people whom you're competing with, and our borders are still very much open and importers are allowed to import whatever it is that they want to import. Yes, the CBN says we will not give you dollars for this number of items, but if you can get the dollars elsewhere, you can bring in these items, and when they do bring it in, they're in competition with you automatically. But we've since found out that this is the situation that we're in, that even in our personal homes, we all have to, you know, think of alternative sources of power. Otherwise, we might be in darkness most of the time. So that is the reality that, you know, manufacturers have had to confront. The question is, how well are we, confronting these alternatives in our places of work? I might not be here today if my company weren't invested in many sources of power, to be able to beam to Nigerians and even far beyond Nigeria's borders. So these alternatives are now a necessity for us. How are Nigerian businesses pooling resources to adapt to the situation which we have all found ourselves?
Yes, I've told you we are. And those are the things we are doing. Man has a manpower development company that is working with experts and practitioners to provide. And we have succeeded in Herika. We have one in Herika. And we have spots around the country where we are processing we are going through the process of having them established. But let me just mention that when the CBN governor is not giving money to import some items, those who import it go to bureau de change or go to black market to source it. That's the same place I'm sourcing to bring in the ones that he allows. So what's the effect? It's of no effect.
Well, let me come to you. I'm going to call you Mr. Strategy. This is and you can feel his pain. You can feel, the frustrations that manufacturers have to deal with. And I'm just wondering, because he said this is not our job. My job is to produce. That's what manufacturers do. My counterparts around the world don't have to do this. So in my mind, I was just thinking that, what if other companies were to say this is going to be our job? We've seen logistics company come up as a result of, trying to solve the problems of moving goods around the country so that businesses don't have to worry about that. I don't know if it would be possible for alternative energy companies to come up. Will it be against our laws, for instance?
Right, okay. So actually that is happening, okay? So there are companies today that provide power as a service, okay? So what that does is exactly the wish of the manufacturers. I don't really want to get bothered about how or where you're sourcing power, right? But just tell me how much I will pay per kilowatt hour of electricity so I can run my business. So I think with all that is going on, that has created this opportunity. And as I speak to you, I think that opportunity also is actually growing. So the interest for that type of service is actually actually on the rise.
Will it be against our laws? Are you aware if the discos will be up in arms against those sort of companies?
Right. So there isn't any law against you procuring power for yourself. So you see, for this facility, you have a generator, right? You did not have to go ask any permission to do that. So these companies actually are setting up, generation capacity close to where you are. Essentially, and you probably are just paying for it. Think about it essentially as somebody taking over the management of your generator, right? So you don't have to worry about maintenance, about diesel and all that. You are just paying a fixed price. So I think that's the business model, and then that really seems to be working. Progressively, what I want to say is, there is no one-cap-fits-all solution out there. Right? What I've seen happen, which I think is also happening, is the distribution companies are willing and open, right, to constructive engagements. Okay, I mentioned much earlier, a distribution company that, created a special tariff class to encourage manufacturers, to do their business. So I think that era where, there was a kind of suspicion on both sides, we really are getting past that, right? The success of the distribution companies is that they have commercial customers within their network, right, who take a sufficient capacity and are able to, to pay for this. The manufacturers also want, good, reliable, affordable grid power. So I think there's a meeting ground for all the parties. I think what I would say is there should be more dialogue. Right, and the dialogue should actually be more multi-sectoral. Right, because it affects everyone. So I think we are on course to say that all the key actors of government, finance, Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the CBN, everyone, we really should come together and look at the country and decide and agree on those key primary areas of focus that we need to start the work today. What I want to say is we really should move away from the quick fixes. Quick fixes will not get us to any sustainable outcomes, right? Let's have a clear situation, a roadmap, where we all subscribe to today. But more importantly, government must also consider, I would say should consider palliatives. Palliatives in the sense of how do you cushion the effect of all of this, headwinds that is pummeling the economy. What we don't want is an upset that creates, a bit of, panic, and then people now start to get into very uncompetitive practices, hoarding and things like that. But let's ensure that we weather this situation together and, without any big major upset to any particular player.
Well, we have to thank you both for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Mr. Bode Longi has been speaking with us here in our Abuja studio. He's a strategic consultant and power expert. And we also had Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadir, who's the Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. So we do hope that the CBN would, and also all the other government officials whom you have been trying to get, will yield eventually to that meeting, which is of utmost necessity at this time. Well, thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily as well.
Thank you.